Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this little cookbook called Clabber Girl Baking Book. Now Clabber Girl is a baking powder company. It's still in existence today. This cookbook dates from 1934. I'm going to start out in this pot with some brown sugar and water. And I just want to bring that to a boil. Just give it a little bit of a stir, dissolve the sugar in there. There we go. So I'm going to bring that up to a boil and we're going to boil it for 10 minutes. We are making something called brown sugar pudding. Very simple recipe, actually. Very simple recipe. But the reason I wanted to do it is this little cookbook is published in 1934. That's during the Great Depression. At about the same time, or maybe even just a little bit earlier, there's a recipe that starts popping up in Quebec, here in Canada, called pudding chômeur. And so pudding chômeur is a Quebecois recipe that translated means unemployed pudding or poor man's pudding. And during the Great Depression, it used very simple ingredients that everybody had in order to make a tasty dessert. And the Quebec version, in most of the cookbooks that I have from the 1920s and 1930s, it uses maple syrup instead of brown sugar, but a small percentage of them do use brown sugar. And today, if you were making pudding chômeur in Quebec, you would probably use brown sugar. But in the time period of the Great Depression, in rural Quebec, maple syrup would have been cheaper than brown sugar because, let's face it, maple syrup comes out of trees. And so I'm interested in this recipe because it's a very similar recipe and I can see it coming from kind of the same place. And so I thought I'd give it a try and see how it tastes and see how the two compare and how they're related. So into this bowl, I'm going to put flour, our Clabber Girl baking powder. Clabber Girl is still made today, although it's not available here in Canada or the part of Canada that I live in, and some white refined sugar. And I'll just give that a bit of a stir just to bring those together. So in the 1910s and the 1920s, all of the little baking cookbooks from the baking powder and baking soda companies, the ad copy in these books were savage, because these companies were at the forefront of a pure foods movement, where they were trying to get the population of the United States to realize that some of the food that they were eating was adulterated. And so they were ruthless in calling out their competitors as being unsafe to eat. Their foods were pure, the others were unsafe. By 1934, when this was published, though, it softened quite a bit. The pure foods laws are in effect in the United States. Things are settling down a little bit. There's not as much adulteration, probably still happens today. And so the ad copy in the front of the books has turned towards how your life is a little bit better and how it bakes better and how you're going to have better results, and it makes your budget stretch a little bit farther by using Clabber Girl instead of the other brands. But there is still a telling sentence on the back. Right at the back. Of course, Clabber Girl baking powder complies with all pure food laws, both state and national. So that hard edge is still there in the marketing of baking powder in 1934. Okay, 10 minutes of boiling. So I'm going to turn off the heat and I'm going to mix the butter into the sugar syrup and get that melted in. Okay, the butter is melted in. So I have a greased baking dish here, greased, buttered, and we're going to pour the hot sugar syrup into that. There we go. Now, I come back to the batter. So in here I've got flour, sugar, and baking powder, and to that I'm going to add some water and raisins, and we're supposed to stir this to create a batter. Okay, I'm going to switch to a rubber spatula for this next bit. I'm supposed to pour this batter into the sugar syrup and then not stir it. Just pour it in there and leave it be. Now the oven is preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and this goes in for about 25 minutes. I'm going to put a baking tray in. I'm kind of afraid that the sugar syrup might bubble over and cause a mess in my nice clean oven. Hey, Jules.
Hey, Glenn. Hey, friends. Spoon or fork?
I think spoon. This
Is that like a sauce and cake?
brown sugar pudding. I mean, it's not too far from a sauce and cake.
Because it looks like there's sauce on the bottom.
Yeah, it's a brown sugar, essentially caramel. It's a brown sugar caramel.
So it looks like there's a caramel on the bottom. It looks like it's like, oh, it's hard to tell if it's like a cake or a bread at the top.
It's kind of half between cake and biscuit.
And biscuit, yes, biscuit would be better.
American biscuit, not biscuit.
It's a big dollop of sugar on the bottom.
It is all sugar on the bottom. It is all sugar on the bottom. Mm-hmm.
That's not bad.
It's really sweet though, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And those raisins give an extra hit of sweet.
It is sweet?
Yeah. I can see, okay, so this is 1934. If you were working, like actually working, not sitting at a desk, 2021 working, you could eat this on a regular basis.
You're suggesting that
Perhaps today,
the sedentary lifestyle of most people, this is not a good idea?
This is not a good idea today.
As I wolf down the whole piece?
It's not going to stop me from eating it. But it is slightly different than pudding chômeur in that the biscuit or cake part is much stiffer. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is very biscuit-like. Mm-hmm. You could almost, if you could figure out how, flip it over beforehand and call it an upside-down cake.
Upside-down cake, yeah. Now there's not much in it. Comes together really quickly. It is, I would say, one of those emergency desserts in that it's very quick to put together and it's stuff that you would always have in your pantry. Maybe not the raisins. We always have raisins in our pantry. But everything else.
And dates, of course.
And dates. That'd be good with dates. So I think this is pretty good. Is this something that your family still makes?
Or a version of it.
Or a version of it. Let us know if your family still makes something like this. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.